What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video. We're going over my core plays for week 2 of the NFL season on DraftKings and FanDuel. And what I'd like to do in these videos is go over my core group of players at each position, what allowed us to progress through it more so for a single entry tournament build. Then at the end, I run my optimizer to see who is popping the most as of right now. If that sounds like something you will enjoy and you're going to be a returning visitor, my name is Chris Pinnell and I break down NFL DFS each and every single week on this channel. And if you do end up enjoying today's content, even if you don't, consider leaving a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, want to be mean to me in the comments, be rude, call me ugly, I don't care either way, but I would love to hear from you. And as I always say, if you ever want access to anything that I do show you here on YouTube, you can get it completely free for a week over on Patreon with their free week trials. You can find that in the link down below in the description or the pinned comment, but there's projections on there, data, cheat sheets, optimizer, ownership projections, my Discord, all that fun stuff. You can find it down below. And like I said, completely free for a week if you want to test it out. But let's start off with the quarterback position. And we have several good options. Now, I did do a first look video, so I'm not going to go incredibly in depth here, but I will try to do some quick hitters here just because I don't want to keep you guys for an hour because no one wants to watch a video that long. But we'll kind of group this by the games because a couple of these teams are playing each other just in incredible game environments. So we'll start with Patrick Mahomes and Trevor Lawrence here first. This is going to be one of the more popular games on the entire slate, 51.5 implied over-under here, which it's going to be hard to beat. That is the top on the slate, and there's definitely going to be a lot of points scored in this game. Both of these defenses can be a bit shaky, and we have two pretty good high-octane offenses. Obviously, you have the Super Bowl champions, Kansas City Chiefs, with Patrick Mahomes under center, and they get their shiny toy Travis Kelce back, and boy, do they need him after watching the Thursday night game versus the Detroit Lions. The wide receiving group, and it's really everybody. Without Travis Kelce, it is an ugly setting. So it's going to be a big bump for Patrick Mahomes here. His over-under, I think, is around 300 yards for this game. Pretty high implied team total. If you can afford Mahomes, yes, I do like him. And he's really not that expensive at $8,300. I mean, you can fit him in quite easily because we do have some good cheap running backs this week. And the wide receivers, I'm not liking the cheap ones too much, but if you do go cheap at RB, this is certainly doable. But if you don't want to spend all the way up, you can get, I think, somewhat similar upside with Trevor Lawrence here at $6,700. And it's really easy to stack up the Jags. You have Calvin Ridley, who looked amazing last week versus the Indianapolis Colts. You have Zay Jones, and Christian Kirk should have a bit of a bounce-back game versus this Chiefs defense. I think it suits his style a little bit more. But really easy to stack both of these guys up, and then the run-back options are obvious. If you stack the Jaguars, run it back with Travis Kelce. If you stack the Chiefs up, run it back with one of your favorite options from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Josh Allen here at $7,100. As of right now, he is looking like my top option for cash games. Now, I'm still going to use him in tournaments and actually think I might roll with him in this build just because I do like this Bills Raiders game quite a bit. I know they're 8.5-point favorites, but I know a lot of people get worried about blowouts and stuff like that. But if they're going to go up that much, it's got to be because the offense did a lot of damage. So I'm not really too concerned about that anyway. Now, if I'm looking at how I have this statted out, just for the players that we're talking about, the quarterback position for this video, even though that Josh Allen's super expensive, he's still my top point per dollar option here, as I have him for 26.2 points. Might it be a little bit aggressive? Maybe, but I've got him for around 270 passing yards, just over 2 touchdowns, 50 yards on the ground, 0.4 rushing touchdowns. So he's grading out pretty well for me, so I love him in all formats. And if you're stacking, Stephon Diggs is the obvious option. Justin Herbert is a tournament option only for me. I would prefer if this game was at home instead of on the road in Tennessee, but if you're going to do any damage versus Tennessee, it's usually through the air. Now, the problem is that I have a lot of interest in Joshua Kelly, the running back. I'm not saying you can't play them both together, but it just doesn't feel as good as it does with Austin Eckler. Now, he's still going to be using the passing game, but just keep in mind it's obviously not going to be the same kind of production. But in tournaments, I don't think Herbert in the passing attack, like Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, is a bad choice. And if you want to run it back, you could look at Derrick Henry on the ground, which is a great matchup versus the Chargers defense. Joe Burrow at $6,900 should be a bit of a bounce-back game here for Cincinnati, but really anything will be a bounce-back game compared to what they did last week versus the Cleveland Browns. They put up 3 points, and Burrow had 82 passing yards after inking a near $300 million deal. Definitely was not ideal, but facing Baltimore, dealing with injuries, the cornerback Marlon Humphrey is out, which is definitely a big bump. So if they're going to bounce back here, I think Burrow can versus this defense that is missing some players, and they're playing at home. 25-point implied team total, easy to stack up with Chase or Diggs. So I think he's fine for tournaments. Brushed on Lawrence already. Anthony Richardson's a fine, cheaper cash option if you're just looking for a cheaper quarterback this week that's going to offer you rushing upside. In his first game, I believe he had just around 40 rushing yards and got into the end zone as well. And if they get it on the goal line, I mean, Anthony Richardson's going to be one of the main threats to score there, which always nice at $6,300. The price came up a little bit, but I still think it's cheap enough versus Houston that obviously doesn't offer too much resistance on defense. Jared Goff, if you want to stack up this Detroit-Seattle game, both him and Geno Smith are totally viable. I think Goff comes in a little bit higher owned because they do have the higher total at 26 compared to 21.5 for the Seahawks on the road. If you are using Jared Goff, you're kind of married to St. Brown because Goff's not a rushing quarterback. He can get there by himself. So if you're going to be rostering Goff, you have to roster some pass catchers. But it's really easy to stack this game up as well because your running back options are guys like Ken Walker, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. And then Brock Purdy, if you want to get a little bit weird, because I think if people are going cheap, they're looking at Richardson or Jared Goff the most, then even a little bit of Geno Smith. But Brock Purdy, I don't think is going to get too much ownership. But this 49er stack is looking a little bit interesting to me. And I do think a lot of people get the CMC as well. So the passing attack might go a little bit under-owned. But with a near 26-point implied team total, he's got great weapons to get the ball to. Deebo Samuel, CMC out of the backfield, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk. That's a great group of players, obviously, on a great offense, and they're facing a Rams defense that I'm not too concerned about whatsoever. So if you're trying to get a little bit different this week, it's not going to feel great. I do think Brock Purdy is certainly in play. And moving over to DraftKings here, and like I always say, if you are copy and pasting a lineup you see from YouTube, you deserve to lose all your money because it's a horrible idea. I am building this on the fly. Please take more time when you're building your lineups and make your own decisions. But we're just going to roll with Josh Allen. I think a Bills Raiders stack will be fun for this video, so we'll roll with it, and then we'll move on to running backs. And as you can see, we have several options here. So whether we want to spend up, go in the middle, or down low, I think we got you covered this week. Now, for me personally, in this build that we are going with, I'm playing Josh Allen, so that means I'm probably having Stephon Diggs in there, and then as a run back option, I'm kind of only left with Devontae Adams, especially with Jacoby Myers. So we're probably going to have to spend down at running back, but again, that's completely dependent on your build. There's no set way you have to go. You just kind of have to go with the flow on that. But up top, CMC, always going to be in play. Elite rushing upside, elite passing work. I mean, his floor is insane. He can make big plays like we saw last week versus Pittsburgh with that 70-yard touchdown. Just obviously, if you have the money for him, excellent play. If not, no biggie. I think we can get some good production from these cheaper backs. Saquon Barkley, I do like him here versus Arizona. This Giants offense is definitely in need of a bounce back performance versus the Dallas Cowboys in prime time. That was absolutely embarrassing. But as a 4.5-point favorite, they're not at home, but I'm not too scared of this Arizona defense. So Saquon Barkley should be in line for probably around 20 total touches, if not more, depending on game script, but it should go in their favor. So I do like Saquon quite a bit. And he's got that receiving floor as well, which does boost everything up a little bit. Derrick Henry, $7,400. So I think he's a nice tournament option here. Yes, I know he got outsnapped by Spears last week, but he's still the main back. Going to get the bulk of the work on the ground, and a great matchup versus this Chargers defense that absolutely bleeds points to the running back position. You're looking at last year, they were 27th versus fantasy running backs and allowed a whopping 130 rushing yards per game to running back. So Derrick Henry is definitely in a good spot for tournaments. And like I said, if you do go with that Charger stack, Derrick Henry might actually be the best run back option. Joe Mixon, if you're just trying to get exposure to the Cincinnati offense, if you don't like the passing attack or you just don't have the passing attack in your builds, playing Mixon's a decent way to hedge that out a little bit. James Conner looks like he's picking up some ownership, which does feel a little bit gross. I realize the usage will be there, should see 15 plus touches, and should get a handful of targets, which is nice to boost the floor. This never feels good playing an Arizona Cardinal, especially with how bad they're probably going to end up being this season and only a 17.5 implied team total. But this New York Giants defense versus the run is not something I'm overly concerned about. So if you're just looking for a guy that's going to get touches, I don't mind Conner, but I do worry about scoring upside because I just don't think the offense is going to be in a position to score too often this season. James Cook would make sense in a build that I don't have Josh Allen because the Bills are going to put up points. And if it's not through the passing attack, someone on the ground is going to have to be scoring, and James Cook's the most likely option there. So in non-Josh Allen builds, I do like Cook there. He's an 8.5-point favorite at home versus an easy run defense and your 28-point implied team total. So he pretty much checks all the boxes for me. A.J. Dillon is in play if Aaron Jones happens to miss, which is looking more and more likely as the week has progressed. He just hasn't been practicing. I don't even think he went out to stretch with the team, I believe, last I saw yesterday. So if Aaron Jones happens to be out, we're getting A.J. Dillon getting all the work in that backfield versus Atlanta. So I do like that quite a bit. But again, it's going to be a wait and see kind of thing. David Montgomery is an excellent option this week. He played around 85% of the snaps last week. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs is expected to get his usage bumped up throughout the entire season. So maybe that trickles down a little bit. But David Montgomery wasn't too bad in that game overall, had a decent stat line. And is a 4.5-point favorite at home versus the Seattle Seahawks defense, which can definitely get burned. I think Montgomery is 100% in play here. And I actually do like him quite a bit for the build that we are going with, just because I don't think we're going to get too much of the Lions offense, considering we don't have Jared Goff. So I'm not sure if I'll get to Amon-Ra St. Brown, because I probably won't be able to afford him. But I do want a piece of this offense because they're going to put up points. So it actually makes sense for me to get exposure somehow, and that would be through the run game. So I think Montgomery is probably a nice candidate for the build that we're rolling with. Ken Walker on the flip side of this game, he's the tournament option, but he's the 4.5-point road dog. But I still think he's definitely in play. He does have similar upside to Montgomery, just maybe less scoring upside. Rashad White, $5,500, good matchup on the ground versus Chicago. Played the majority of the snaps last week, and he's a fine running back. Should get some work through the air as well. So I like him, but with Joshua Kelly now being the starting running back for the Chargers, it kind of made him lose his luster a little bit. I do have more interest in guys like A.J. Dillon if Jones is out and Dave Montgomery. So White's fine, but not going my way to play him. But the matchup is good, and he is a 2.5-point favorite at home. But Josh Kelly is going to be your chalk RB of the week. Now, the matchup is absolutely awful if you're looking at how the Titans have fared versus running backs last season. First DVA versus the run, the fourth fewest points in the running back position, and only 62 rushing yards per game. So the matchup sucks. But if you're going to be the Austin Eckler in this Chargers offense, I'm not saying he's as good, but he's going to be in that role. And Kelly was actually pretty darn good last week versus Miami. Obviously, the matchup was a lot easier last week, but this is a very valuable position to be in. So if you're going to give me 15, 20 touches in the Chargers offense at a $5K price tag at the running back position, I'm sorry, but you're just going to have to enter my lineups because even though the matchup sucks, you're probably going to get there somehow. And it's not like I'm projecting him for 1 million points. I have him for around 13, 14 points, which isn't amazing, but it's not bad either, especially at 5K. And that's definitely the best point per dollar option at the position. So you are playing cash games, Kelly, definitely a guy that you're probably locking in. And moving over to our build here. Like I said, I want to get some exposure to this Lions offense, and I do have concerns that I won't be able to do it with a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. So we're going to plug in David Montgomery here just to soak up some exposure there at $5,800. And then we'll probably just be chalk donkeys here. We'll plug in Joshua Kelly. It's just hard for me to pass up the volume at $5,000. And moving on to our pass catchers, we try to keep this as simple as possible. So we're just kind of going with the receivers that we are stacking up, looking at quarterbacks we're using, who's our run back options, what games are we stacking up in general. And obviously there is some fine one-off options for cash games and things like that because you can't stack your entire build. But to go over the entire wide receiver list and breaking it down one by one, I feel like is a bit of a waste of time just because good wide receivers, no matter what the matchup is, are going to find ways to obviously get production like Stephon Diggs on Monday Night Football versus Sauce Gardner and the Jets defense. People are scared of that matchup. Guess what? It doesn't matter. Stephon Diggs goes out there and balls out anyway. So usually always give the edge to receivers anyway because they know where they're going. The defense typically is a foot behind. But Stephon Diggs, he's my number one wide receiver on the week, I believe. Projection-wise, it might be close between a couple, but I do think Diggs is at the very top. Just a good matchup versus the Raiders. Love Josh Allen. Love the game environment overall. Love the Bills at home. So he's my number one option. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. If you're using Joe Burrow, you got to have interest in both of these guys. You can use one, but you could obviously use both. T. Higgins is a nice buy low option here, all the way down at $6,400. I know he absolutely goosed you last week, just a bad overall day from the Bengals offense, but had 8 targets, was high in the air yards department, but 0 catches. But that's obviously not going to continue, so I'll be 100% fine rolling with T. Higgins once again. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's going to be one of the more cashy, safest options of the entire week. The guy's just the target hog, which is what you want on a PPR site like DraftKings. $7,800, I think, is a fair price point. Good matchup versus Seattle, who got absolutely destroyed by Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua last week, if that tells you anything. So I do think Jared Goff and St. Brown can have a fine time versus the Seahawks defense. Devontae Adams is our obvious run back option with Stephon Diggs in the Bills offense. Calvin Ridley, just stacking this game up for using Trevor Lawrence. He's kind of married to you there. And Keenan Allen, Mike Williams are your obvious pairing options with Justin Herbert. And like I said, if you're going to move the ball on this defense, it's typically through the air, so they do have a good matchup there. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, whether using Geno Smith or Jared Goff, they make sense in those builds as either run back options or just pairing options with your quarterback. Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, I think are a bit underpriced this week versus this Rams defense. I do think the 49ers will have a lot of success in this game offensively. And if you can get guys that both can obviously give you great production. Brandon Ayuk had a fantastic week 1. We know the upside with Deebo Samuel. Those are your obvious options with Brock Purdy if you're not rolling out a George Kittle or a CMC. Then we have Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. If you can't quite get the Calvin Ridley in game stacks, I mean, they're fine, cheaper options. Christian Kirk, not a great week last week. Zay Jones did fine, but with this man defense versus the Kansas City Chiefs, I do think that at least makes it a little bit better for Christian Kirk this weekend. And Puka Nacua, the darling of last week, had 14, 15 targets, something insane like that, 120 receiving yards out of nowhere. Just obviously an exceptional game. I guess he's the new Cooper Kupp. Did have an injury throughout the week in practice, but sounds like he's going to be good to go. And if that's the case at $4,900, kind of hard to pass it up because the ball's going to go somewhere in this offense, and it's pretty much Puka and Tutu. Van Jefferson, a bit of a no-show last week, and Tyler Higbee's kind of boring. So I think Puka is definitely the best option here. I'm not expecting 20 targets and 100 million yards again, but he can just give us like 5-6 catches with around 60 yards. We'll take that in cash games around $4,000, $5,000. And if you are stacking up the 49ers, he's a pretty cheap run back option as well. And moving back over to our lineup, I already said this 20 times, but since we have Josh Allen, we're going to be using Stephon Diggs because it just makes sense. Obviously, if you want to go with a guy like Gabe Davis to double stack, or if you just want to get different and not play Diggs, you can do it. Just you are living a bit on the edge. Then our obvious stacking option as a run back guy would be Devonta Adams here at $7,600. And the big thing here this weekend, I would have liked him anyway, even if he was playing, but Jacoby Myers is out. Did see 10 targets last week, and Devonta Adams already had 9, so I mean, the ball's going to go somewhere, and the backup options aren't too pretty. So Devonta Adams could easily get like 15 targets in this game. I'm not projecting that, but it's certainly possible. I think well over a 30% target share is certainly in the cards here. So $7,600, we're going to be plugging him in. And I realized that I ate a good chunk of our salary. We have just under $4,000 left per player, but keep in mind, we can play a cheap tight end like a Kincaid. If you want to double stack with Allen, he's like $3,300. We can plug in a cheap defense around $3K. Then we should have enough money to do whatever we want. And the funnest part of this video, talking tight ends and defenses, I know, absolutely exhilarating. Try to stay in your seat. But up top, we did get the man Travis Kelce back, so that's actually a little bit exciting. $7,600, looked good in practice. Fake that he hurt his knee again and then started twerking, so it sounds like he's going to be good to go. And we know the upside with Travis Kelce. I mean, basically the wide receiver 1 in that offense. So if you're going to be the wide receiver 1 for Patrick Mahomes, below $8,000, you have my attention. So if you can afford them, great. If not, there's still some cheap options. George Kittle, if you are using Brock Purdy, that's the only way I'd probably get to him. Sam Laporta and Jared Goff stacks, probably the only way I'm getting to him as well, but it's fine. It's a good matchup for Seattle as a tight end. They did kind of bleed points versus that position last year. Zach Ertz, it's ugly at $3,500, but my projections do like him. The targets will be there. He's cheap. It's just quarterback play is obviously not going to be the best over there in Arizona this season. Dalton Kincaid, the rookie, he is interesting here at $3,300. He does make for an easy double stack option with Josh Allen stacks. You just kind of have to hope he falls into the end zone. Luke Musgrave, again, the rookie, had a decent game last week. Had 50 yards on 3 catches, right around 8 fantasy points. Good overall day. If you're trying to hunt for a cheap tight end, I don't think he's a bad option. Then Adam Troutman, Denver tight end, got hurt. He's going to be gone, so he's going to be the tight end 1 now, which Greg Dulcich, I should say. But Adam Troutman, I mean, it's not exciting. We played him on the Saints a couple times, I believe, before. I want to say he was chalk 1 week. I don't think it went well, but he's $3,000. So if you just catch a few passes, which what I haven't projected at, he is one of the best point dollar options at the tight end position this week. And then looking at defenses, the only thing I do every single week, I scroll all the way down to the bottom and try to find the first viable defense Vegas-wise. And I'll tell you right now, it's not looking too pretty this weekend. The Cardinals only have a 22, and they are playing at home. It still doesn't feel that great, though. The Bears versus Baker Mayfield, who we know can get some turnovers. They are somewhat interesting. My favorite defense of the week is probably the Buccaneers here, though, at $3,200. They're a 2.5-point favorite at home, 19-point implied team total against them. I don't think it's the worst option. The Falcons are also viable at $2,900. But for me, I don't like to spend up at the defense position, so if it's really above the Buccaneers, I don't have a ton of interest there. And even $3,200 doesn't feel that great. But I would say just off the top of my head here, eyeballing it, the Buccaneers, the Falcons, and maybe even the Cardinals look viable this week for cheap defenses. I'm trying to finish this lineup off. We have 4 positions left. Let's plug in a cheap defense so we know what kind of money we have to work with. If we have to put it down a little bit, we can do that. But let's plug in the Buccaneers as of right now. It gets us just over $4,000. Let's use Kincaid just to get that double stack in with Josh Allen. Now we're now at $4,600, so things are starting to look a little bit up, although I do feel like we're going to have to go a little bit cheaper on our defense just to try to fit in something else, because I don't think this range, like around $4,300, is going to be too pretty. But we're going to plug in Puka here at $4,900, assuming he's fully good to go, because that leaves us with $4,300, and I don't think the options down here are going to be too pretty. You do have guys like Kyle Pitts, but that's really about the only name that looked somewhat interesting there. So we'll probably just move down our defense, because I'm not going to be stuck on a defense. Let's just go cheap here with the Cardinals. We don't have any Giants, so it's not conflicting or anything. Puts us right back at $4,900, which is a bit of a better range, because I think we could get a guy like a Christian Kirk if we wanted, Marquise Brown, Romeo Doubs, Nico Collins, who I actually don't hate Nico Collins this week. So I'll kind of leave that up to your imagination, whoever you want to use. I believe Zay Jones is down here as well if you want to try to get some Jacksonville Jaguars exposure. Yeah, $4,700. So plenty of ways you can go. Don't copy and paste this. Think for yourself. Build your own lineups. But the way we constructed this build, I do think looks pretty good. And like I said, I went on the optimizer at the end to see who is popping the most as of right now. Don't have a ton of settings in place, just some stacking options turned on and a little bit of randomness. But a quick 20 lineups here, so we'll just pull up the builds and not play with exposure or anything. But as you can see, we're going to get like every single time you have a quarterback, it's going to get paired with a wide receiver and then ran back with another option from that game. So if you're just looking at the first build here, you're going to have Joe Burrow paired up with Tyler Boyd, then Zay Flowers. Obviously, I'd kind of prefer to have like a Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, and you can set that up in groups to where you want at least one of those two instead of like a Tyler Boyd getting mixed in. But it does follow the rules that we did have set in place. Look over here, we have Josh Allen paired with Stephon Diggs, ran back with Hunter Renfrow, which is totally fine, does follow the rules there. But just looking at the usage here, lots of Joshua Kelly, Bucks defense, Devontae Adams, Montgomery, CMC. Allen looks like our highest quarterback. Looks like we're getting a lot of Joe Burrow and a decent amount of Patrick Mahomes down there as well. So just kind of what you'd expect. It's the teams that we talked about. Our team exposure really quick: Buffalo, Vegas, Arizona, Cincy, Detroit getting put in the most. Game stacks looks like it loves Buffalo, Las Vegas this week, which I get. It's the main stack that we went with, so I'm not too surprised about that. Detroit, Seattle was another popular one. And while it's not as pretty, Arizona and New York, there is some popular plays from that game, so it does make sense that they do get populated a little bit. With that being said, guys, that's all I got for this week's video. So if you did enjoy, or even if you didn't, leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. I'll be more than happy to get back to you. But I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you all next time.